Triple homicide that obviously appears to have resulted from domestic violence. We hear about domestic violence all the time, and unfortunately, we've become rather numb to those stories. I guess on a national news front, whether you know who Chris Brown and Rihanna, who they are, I think young folks obviously know who they are. They're two entertainers, they're singers, recording artists, Chris Brown and Rihanna. If you didn't know who they were, well, I guess it was the Grammy show, you probably know who they are now. And they have brought domestic violence back to the front pages and all the entertainment websites and entertainment shows and so forth. Allegedly, Chris Brown beat the bejeebies out of Rihanna, and she's not pressing charges. The photos of her beating have been posted all over the internet, so even though it spawns all sorts of emotions from us, those of us who see and read and hear about domestic violence, you know, we really, what do you do about it? So we have some folks here who know quite a bit about domestic violence. They work with it every day. As we mentioned, Detective Ray Davis, along with James Howard with the Clarksville Police Department, and Peggy Micais with the Sheriff's Department. Make sure I get this right. You are victims advocates. Is that your titles?
Well,
or
that's part of what we do.
Peggy, Ray?
We're both detectives, myself and James Howard. We're
right.
detectives.
So, but you don't just work with domestic violence, or you all investigate all sorts of crimes, or what?
We investigate other crimes as well, but our primary focus is domestic violence.
Peggy, you've been doing this for, what will you tell me earlier?
It was 5 years and a few months.
How did you find yourself into this area of law enforcement working with domestic violence?
I'd reached a point in my life, I was, I had quit my last job and take a few months off to spend time with my family, done some soul searching, and decided I was at a point in my life I wanted to get a job to help people. And the next day, the job for the Domestic Violence Unit Coordinator, Deputy Sheriff position was posted. I applied, went through the procedure, and was selected for that position. And it was like a godsend.
How about you, Detective Davis? How did you find your way into domestic violence?
Well, the Clarksville Police Department came up with a domestic violence unit. And back at the time, I initially applied, and I didn't receive the position, but later on I did receive the position. And I've been doing it since 2000.
When there's a domestic violence situation, a call, I guess the frontline police officers respond to the call, 911 or so forth. Are you called out immediately? Do you go to those calls when they come in, or will those calls be turned over to you the next morning?
Basically what happens is the officers respond to the case. If it's not a very serious incident with serious injuries, then we're not called out. However, we see all the reports for the city of Clarksville basically within the next day or so, because we keep a running log and the statistics of the cases as they go along.
Peggy, you were telling me the same thing. It's the reports sort of filter their way down to your desk, and you take it from there?
It's pretty much the procedure's the same. The patrol level officer is going to be the responding officer. The majority of it's going to be a misdemeanor crime, and they're trained to handle that on their own, take a warrant if the meets the statutory requirements.
Yeah.
If it's a felony, or if it's something they can't determine who the primary aggressor is, it'll be referred for investigation. Then it comes to our unit. In addition to that, as the Sheriff's Office, we maintain the records for all orders of protection, whether it's a city or county case, and all the conditions of release, regardless if it's city or county. We maintain all those records.
Detective Davis, how do you keep your emotions in check when you meet with a victim of domestic violence and see the damage done by the aggressor? I mean, how do you separate your emotions when you meet up with a woman who's been obviously severely beaten? Peggy was sharing with me earlier, I believe Hope. Is it Hope that we're going to the conditions that you found her in when you first met her? How do you do that?
Well, basically, when we basically listen to what's going on, or we read the reports and find out what's going on, and we try to hear both sides of the story. Once we hear the sides of the story, when we find out who the primary aggressor is, we basically know that that person is going to be prosecuted. And so although they may have caused the victim, and I don't really say male or female because it's pretty much everybody, we know that they're going to be prosecuted and that their life is going to get difficult based on the fact of their actions.
Peggy, you were telling me in some pretty graphic detail what you have seen in your years in working with domestic violence. And as I referenced a minute ago, just the high-profile case of Chris Brown and Rihanna. If you've seen those pictures, they're fairly brutal, and yet we're hearing that she is not cooperating with this investigation and pressing charges and this and that. You know, when you run across a woman like Hope, who we'll meet in a little bit, and you see the damage done, did she move forward and prosecute and so forth? Why do some women not prosecute, and why do some women go back to that environment?
You know, I'm glad you asked that. Hope did not want to prosecute. What happens, what I've seen, and I'm sure Ray has seen this too, it's a system. It's a, you know, he tears her down bit by bit, emotionally, psychologically first. And the physical can be in there, but it's just tearing down her defenses. She's dependent on him most of the time. If it's a woman victim, she's dependent on him for financial. She has children. The family is supportive to a point, and then all of a sudden they're just tired of hearing it. They're tired of helping her. I've helped you, and you keep going back. Because she doesn't really feel like psychologically her self-confidence is gone. He's stripped her of that. The lady we're going to speak with, Hope, was in the same situation. He had told her she's ugly, she's fat. They just tear them down. They have no self-confidence, and then they start beating them down, physically beating them down. And because she's used to it, somehow she's turned off her emotions where she doesn't really feel it anymore. Even the physical pain, she doesn't feel it anymore.
Detective Davis, let me ask you this. I'm sure you've heard a variety of excuses from those who have been charged with domestic violence, or let's just say the aggressor. I was sharing with Peggy an experience I had many years ago when I was in college over at Harry Cohn about some of the reasons why the aggressor may justify his actions, his or her actions. What is, I guess, the craziest excuse you've ever heard or explanation you've ever heard about why some guy have just beaten the living daylights out of this woman? I mean, and I know it's not justified on any means, but what are some of the craziest things you've heard?
Basically, the most common thing is that they were either drunk, and that's usually what they always say, that they were drunk at the time, or they were forced into a position that that's the only thing they felt was to strike out, things of that sort. It's, like I said, 90% of the time is based on alcohol or something to that effect. Financial reasons, or this person did this, or this person did that, and so in retaliation, I lost control, is what they usually tell me.
Well, I know there's no excuse for that, but we're going to talk about solutions, obviously, and what you all do to help victims of domestic violence. We talked to several folks this week about being a part of this program. One outlet was Safe House, and that number is a toll-free number. We'll give that in a moment. There's a local number, 552-6900. We have had folks from Safe House on the station before. So if you are a victim of abuse, the number is 552-6900. Peggy, domestic abuse isn't necessarily the serious beatings that we may be accustomed to. And I reference again the Chris Brown Rihanna thing, or I reference what you were telling me about Hope and how badly she was beaten and bit and all that. I mean, domestic violence can be just a backhanded slap upside the head, or could it be psychological abuse, no physical abuse, or is everything you deal with physical abuse?
No, it's both, just like you said. And you was making me think about the psychological. I actually had a lady that referred to it as Cool Whip abuse. That's what she referred it to, because he had never actually laid his hands on her. So she said, I'm a victim of abuse, Cool Whip abuse. And at first I didn't understand.
Cool Whip abuse.
Right.
I mean, I don't understand how you all get involved in an issue like that. I mean, there's never been any sort of a physical altercation. I mean, it could be just that she's saying, well, he's just a knucklehead, or he doesn't talk to me nice, or whatever. How do you get involved in what you call Cool Whip abuse?
Well, what happens, we were grant funded to start our domestic violence unit some years ago in 2003. We received about $2 million total over a period of 4 years. actually more like 6 years, to build our domestic violence unit. And in doing that, we started networking with Fort Campbell for military cases, City of Clarksville, to work in conjunction with them for serving orders of protection, with the court clerk's office, Safe House, Legal Aid, DA. It's a whole Centerstone, chaplains, a whole network, okay, of agencies to assist. So a lot of times the officers are trained to refer a victim when they're complaining. They might not be able to report a crime, but they still need assistance. So they'll refer them either by phone call or walk in to the office. That's when they're referred to another agency.
We're talking about domestic abuse in Clarksville, Montgomery County. Our guest, Peggy Micais with the Sheriff's Office, and Detective Ray Davis with the City Police Department, along with James Howard, who told me when he came in he's just observing. And I'm not sure if that's the truth or if he's just keeping an eye on me. I'm not sure. We'll have more on domestic. Way too much domestic violence. Obviously, I don't know if it's because there's more news outlets for us to read and hear and see about domestic violence or what, but there's way too much domestic violence. Joining us today, Detective Ray Davis with the City Police Department and James Howard, along with Peggy Micais with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. Coming up, we're going to talk by phone with a lady named Hope, who has been, I guess she is a survivor of domestic violence, Peggy. Is that
That's
how you
correct.
refer to her?
That's correct.
And I will let her describe her experience, because when Peggy was telling me about Hope and what she went through, I mean, I was ready to go find the guy and shoot him. I mean, that's just me, you know. But if you are the victim of domestic violence, you can call Safe House at 552-6900. Peggy, Ray, I want you, Peggy and Ray, I'm sorry, sound like you were Peggy Ray, I'm sorry. Do most folks just call 911? Or if they're concerned about being in the news or having a police report? I know there are a lot of cases where a woman is getting beat fairly regular, but she doesn't want to get her husband in trouble. He could be a high-profile businessman or a public figure, and they want to kind of solve the issue behind closed doors and out from in front of the media. Without calling 911, what would you recommend? Where would you recommend people turn if they would like to try to get out of this cycle?
I would encourage anybody that's in a dangerous situation to call 911, period, regardless of what they're concerned about. A lot of people are concerned about the kind of aftermath. If the husband's arrested, he might lose his job. There's all kinds of complications that would set in if one party is arrested. However, if it's not an emergency situation and they're basically just tired of living the way they're living, they could call, for example, Legal Aid for some assistance at 552-6656. The Safe House, as you mentioned, if they need safe housing, okay? We have clergy, or they can call other clergy, reach out to their family members, co-workers, friends, anybody that could give them some encouragement to break the cycle.
Detective Davis, if you get a lead on a particular case, or let's just say that some beat cops responded to a call the night before, and as you were telling me earlier, the tough part is determining who's telling the truth. Will they file a report that will filter to you that you may want to check on this situation? And if so, when you go check on that situation, are they cooperative, and what do you advise them to do?
Basically, every report comes to myself and Detective Howard. We have what's called the domestic trouble, and we also have the domestic assault up to aggravated assault and further on. And so every call that the officers go on is documented, and therefore it comes to us in form of a police report.
Go ahead.
While they're out there on the scene, if there's a question of who might be the primary aggressor, in some cases they'll call myself, and they'll kind of run the scene by me. And after they do that, then if I can determine who the primary aggressor is, then I will give them my opinion on it, and then they'll act upon it as that.
Well, it almost seems, now, again, I don't know anything about it, I'm learning. It almost seems to me like it's fairly obvious and it sounds to me like you and Detective Howard respond to more actual scenes of the crime than Peggy does, simply because of obviously the protocol of your positions or whatnot. But it seems to me that you two and your unit respond to it would seem to me that it's fairly obvious that you go into a situation, here's a bloody and battered woman, and here's this guy over here going, I didn't do nothing. You know, she ticked me off. You know, she come home late. She didn't change the diaper or whatever. I didn't hit her. I didn't know. But it seems kind of obvious. How do you figure that out?
Basically, if there's any signs of an assault that we can determine right off the bat, then the perpetrator is going to jail. You know, there is no, you know, I mean, if somebody's standing there with some kind of bruises or something and making that allegation that the other partner was the cause of it, that person is going to jail.
What if she hit him first? What if, you know, he came home drunk and, you know, she's not too happy about it, and she's fuming and fussing and whatever, and typically, you know, she'll slap him upside the head or something, or maybe shove him, and being man versus woman, so to speak, you know, he just hauls off and boom, pops her one, you know, get out of my face. Well, who's at fault? Who do you take to jail? What do you do? She hit him first.
Well, basically, we try to find out the primary aggressor. In that case, maybe she hit him first, okay? Now, if she hit him first and he just kind of retaliated to try to get away from him, then she's gone. Even though I mean, there is no such thing as female, because I'm a female, I'm not going to jail. That doesn't happen anymore, okay? As far as, in some cases, if they're both, we determine that they're both primary aggressors, then we'll take them both.
Is it true, and I'll get to you in a minute, Peggy, I'm sorry, but is it true that somebody's going to jail if you all make a call? In other words, I've always heard that if city police have to respond to a domestic call, somebody's going to jail regardless. Is that true?
No, because we have those categories of domestic trouble. Now, if it's a domestic trouble, nobody's been any assaulting at all, then we'll hear what's going on and it'll be documented. If there's an allegation of assault, then somebody's going to jail.
Peggy, let me ask you, have you ever run across situations where you're working with a victim, and I hate to keep saying a female victim, but they typically are the ones that are the most, I don't know, they're the ones that apparently are the most victims in domestic situation. Have you ever run across a situation where she's not really the victim? In other words, you determine or you learn during your investigation or your work with a certain couple that, you know, you find out that, okay, you got a fat lip, you know, last weekend and this and that and the other, but we've determined that, you know, you're the abuser here. What do you do, or if that's happened, how do you handle that?
Well, actually, it would be more to the case that she's manipulating the system because it's a divorce. A lot of times it involves children or property, so she's going to manipulate the system to her benefit. That's what she tries to do. We've had some cases, not very many. Most of the cases that we work, and Ray would probably agree, if there's been an arrest, it was the proper response to the call. And I think based on what you were saying a while ago, if I can comment on that, you said basically somebody's going to go to jail. The statute says the preferred response is the arrest of the primary predominant aggressor. That's Tennessee statute. Doesn't always mean somebody's going to jail, because like Ray said, they're going to determine if there's probable cause to meet the criteria of the statute.
Well, I just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you all determine. Ray, Detective Davis, I think it's just so much pressure on police officers and sheriff's deputies to get to a scene. And I know sheriff's deputies respond, obviously covering the counties, that I don't know, what is the training about for a young officer? Let's just say a guy's been in the field 6 months, he's 2 a.m. in the morning, and typically when you get on the force, you're working the graveyard shift and so forth, and this young kid, green behind the ears and this and that's been through his training, he's no longer has a training officer, and he shows up, and here's a married couple in their 40s or whatnot, and they're you know, how does a police officer make that determination? How does he handle that situation and determine that, you know, somebody's going to jail, or we've got a domestic situation going on here?
Well, you know, it's pretty much, it's in writing that it must be an arrest if there's any allegation of assault. However, in some cases, there can be an assault, and if the officers can't determine the primary aggressor, they'll write in their report why they didn't feel that they could determine that primary aggressor. when that report comes across our desk, when we look at it, if we can determine the primary aggressor, sometimes then I'll take out a warrant myself, or we'll refer it back and tell them what we think about it. But we're basically on call 24/7.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if an officer has a problem and he doesn't feel comfortable with it, they can always call us at any time, and we'll tell them what we think about it. Or the supervisors are there for them, and there's also veteran officers on the shifts all the time as well.
They always have backup in a domestic.
Yes.
And that's always, I mean, that is the standard operating procedure. I mean, these are the most hated calls. Can I make that assumption by police and sheriff's deputies?
They're also
Is
one
it
of the most
domestic?
dangerous calls for an officer to respond to.
When you get there, let me ask you this. When an officer gets there, let's say the 911 call it's a frantic plea for help from a woman. She's screaming, he's beating me, he's this and that. I've got children, and we're scared to death, yada, yada, he won't leave me alone. And the police officers get there, or the sheriff's deputies get there, and they only see the victim. What do you do? When you come on the scene, what do police officers do? Because, I mean, this guy or whoever, could be out back. He could be, in the bedroom with a pistol, or he could be sitting on the parking lot, and you don't know. I mean, what do they do when they get on the scene?
Well, basically, when they get there, they're going to take the necessary precautions anyway. Officer safety is primary. So when they get there, it's going to be more than one. And a lot of times, if it's a heated situation such as that, there won't just be two. There may be 3 or 4 that go, and everybody's going to cover everybody's back. So maybe they might not see this person, but they're observing the area to try to make sure that they don't get any kind of surprises.
So, Peggy, they want to know right away, where's the aggressor? Where is he? Right away.
That's correct.
They identify who called. You're Susie. You made the call. We're here. Where is so-and-so? You want to know that right away.
That's correct.
Where are the kids? Where's the guy?
That's correct. And the county actually, before I started working there in 2003, had a situation where they responded to the domestic, and the man did have a rifle, high-powered rifle, waiting in some distance. And I'm just sure it was just, a miracle that they didn't get killed.
We'll talk more about domestic violence in a moment. Our guest today, Peggy Micais with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, Detective Ray Davis with the City Police Department, along with James Howard. You haven't heard anything out of James today. He's observing, and we appreciate him being here. Truth be known, he's keeping an eye on me and Gary. I thought it was me at first, but I realized Gary's here. Gary Baker from tvclarksville.com. No, I'm kidding. We're glad to have him here. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk by phone to a young lady named Hope, and she's going to tell her story of abuse. Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, Detective Ray Davis of the City Police Department, along with James Howard, Detective Howard, and we're talking about domestic violence here this hour. And if you need help, you can call 552-6900. That is the Safe House. And obviously, if you're obviously a victim of domestic abuse or assault or any situation that you feel threatened, you call 911, and police and sheriff's officers will come to your aid. And we're trying to learn more about how to break this cycle of violence, what you can do to help. There's counseling available. There are hotlines available 24/7 if you are the victim of any sort of day-to-day abuse. We're excited, obviously, to get a chance to meet a young lady by phone who has, I guess you are a survivor of domestic abuse. It's much like alcoholics or folks who have struggled with drugs and alcohol. It's a day-to-day thing. But for broadcast purposes, her name is Hope. We're not giving her real name today for obvious reasons. And good morning, Hope. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you.
Cool. You been up for a while this morning?
Yes.
Well, we appreciate you joining us here and sharing your story of how you have survived domestic abuse. Can you tell us when it started, maybe how it started, where you were? You were obviously here in the Clarksville, Fort Campbell area for a while. Tell us what happened.
I was in a 14-year marriage, and the abuse basically started immediately, and it took me a while to get out of it, but I had back in 2005, he held me in for 7 days and beat me for 7 days, basically, and I had bruises from front to back, head to toe, over my entire body. And when I talked to him, into letting me go to work. When I got to work, I asked for help. And then then that's when I contacted the sheriff's department in Clarksville, and I was able to get away, but I went back to him, and against the advice of what everybody was telling me not to do. And then within a 2-month period, he had hit me again, and I went back to the sheriff's department and the domestic violence unit in Clarksville, and they helped me get away. And from that point on, I've been away ever since. I went to a women's shelter and spent the summer of 2005 in a women's shelter and got counseling, and then I moved out of the state to ensure my children and myself were safe and away from him. And so I still live in fear that I'm going to see him walking around the corner every day, but I feel safe. I know I'm secure. And
let me ask you something. This situation, your ex-husband, when you all were courting, dating, getting to know each other, did this manifest itself then, or was it after you had become married? You had married and had children. Tell us what happened and when it happened, and you obviously had to be extremely surprised that there was this side of him.
I was, and actually, he did hit me before I got married, but somehow I made everything my fault, and he told me that it was my fault if I wouldn't do a certain behavior, or if I did things the way he wanted me to, then he wouldn't hit me. So somehow I justified everything in my head as if everything was my fault. But yeah, it surprised me that I was in that situation. I never thought that I would let somebody do that to me, but somehow the abuser or something made everything okay in my head that this was normal.
Some of our listeners may be asking, okay, Hope, first time this guy goes off on you, why didn't you bolt? Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you get out of this? You had to realize that, or I assume you had to realize that he was going to do it again. What made you stay, and what made you stick around? And then after you had found some shelter, found safety after that serious beating, what made you go back?
When it first happened, I figured, well, if I changed the way I acted, if I behaved the way he wanted me to, I did what he wanted me to, then he wouldn't hit me. And then after a while, it seemed that it was almost acceptable. And not really, I don't know how to explain it, because people that haven't been in the situation, they don't understand that it's also in your mind, and you think that you're the one at fault, and you're the one that caused this to happen, so you try to do everything that you can to fix it. And then after the serious beating, when I got away, he found out where I was, and I was afraid not to go back. And so I did go back. But I think when he hit me again, and I realized that, this is never going to stop. That finally, after 14 years, and he hit me in the head that last time, it was like, I woke up and I was like, this is never going to change. And I was trying to get out of the house, but he threatened to kill my children. And I think that is when I really finally got the strength, because he told me if I put him in jail, he would find me and he would kill me and my children.
How many children are involved here?
I have 2 children. One is biologically his, and one he raised.
Did they witness all this abuse?
They heard a lot. They never actually seen it, but they heard a lot.
You want to describe to us the 7 days of hell, I guess, is how you would describe it, where he obviously kept you and wouldn't let you go anywhere, and this and that and the other. Peggy, and it's strictly up to you, Hope, if you want to or not, but Peggy described to me the condition you were in and how badly he had beaten you. You want to describe what happened?
He basically beat me like I was a man. I mean, he's my breasts were bruised from him squeezing my breasts. He beat me with a belt on my back. He kicked me. He literally like a wrestler, kind of jump, like he jumped on me, elbowing me in the back. He bit me. He punched me with his fist several times in my face and across my body. And at one time, he had a yardstick at one time, and it broke. And he tried to rape me with the yardstick.
Was there never a point during that experience, I should say, over a couple of days, where you could not get out of the house, or you could not call 911, or that had to be an awfully hopeless, desperate situation to think that there was never an opportunity, like if he went to the restroom or if he went to get a sandwich, or I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine what's going on here, but, for 7 days this went on and you had no opportunity to get help?
I tried at one point, and I actually did get to the phone, and I dialed 911, and before I could hit the send button, he grabbed the phone and beat me again and told me that if he went to jail, that he would, before the cops got here, if the cops came before the cops got here, he would kill me. So I was scared.
All right, so tell us now about your new life and life after the abuse and your recovery. I can only assume that you have permanent scarring from the beatings, but mentally, how are you? How is your life? And how do you deal with those memories each day? Does it get better each day? How are you dealing with that?
At first, it was really hard, and but you get stronger every day.
Do you go to counseling about why you endured all that and how not to get into that cycle again?
Yes, but it's I'm not sure of the statistics, but with women and that have been in a domestic violence relationship, they have a tendency to go towards the same type of guy. So you have to really work hard to find out what triggers you and what makes you think that this is acceptable to stay away. And you learn, the signs. Men that are overly jealous, men that are possessive, men that try to control you. You learn to notice that in the beginning, so that, and hopefully at that point you have the strength to walk away at that time, because you realize that you're better than this, and that you're stronger than this, and that you don't deserve this. Because I think that's the hardest thing for me when I first left, was to realize that I didn't deserve, no matter what I did, no matter how I was, I didn't deserve to be treated and beat on like that. And the main thing is, for me, is to see the light in my children's eyes now, because before there was, they didn't have any brightness to their eyes, and now they do. And now they smile, and they can actually have a conversation with someone without feeling in fear that they're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And so I actually found strength through my children at first. But I still, like walking outside at night or walking around a corner, if somebody's there, I still get startled because I'm still expecting to see him. But and the nightmares are slowly going away. But I think it's going to take a little bit longer to if I'm ever completely okay, or completely without fear from him.
Are you able to? Do you feel as though you are now to have another relationship? Is there? Do you feel as though you would like to have a relationship? Is there any way that you feel that you could ever trust another man again?
Yeah, I have been gone now. From April 2nd will be my 4 years away from him completely. No contact other than court and divorce hearings and stuff. It'll be 4 years. So, and I am, for the first time, starting to date now. I've been dating for 6 months, and everything is okay. I'm taking things slow because, of how, because of my fear.
Well, Hope, thanks so much for sharing your story with us this morning. God bless you, child, and be good and be safe and be healthy and be happy. And we just wish you all the best. We appreciate you sharing your story with us, and we hope you just have a very happy and productive life, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right, Hope. Have a good weekend. Thanks.
You too. Bye.
All right. Well, I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. Peggy, you lived that experience. You watched that experience. Is that fairly typical?
Yes, I think the most important thing that Hope shared with us is that she finally decided that she deserved to be treated better. While the women, because of the psychological abuse, now the man systematically tears them down, where they can't really resist or fight back. They get to a point where they think and believe it's their fault and that that's what they deserve.
Detective Ray Davis and Sheriff Deputy Peggy Micais with us in studio today about domestic violence. We just spoke with a young lady named Hope who used to live here, has a family, and was just obviously just imagine my tears. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Really, what was going on with this woman. Detective Davis, what has been your experience as to why do women, or I should say victims of this, feel that it's their fault? I cannot wrap my brain around that.
It's pretty much like a grooming process. The perpetrator usually makes them feel as though if you hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have had to do this, things of that sort. But I tend to tell people that it's like Pandora's box or a box. If I sit a box on the table with a big snake in it and I tell you don't open the box and I walk out the room and you open the box and get bit, then it's not my fault. It's your fault for not, listening to what I told you and opening that box. So just like that with the perpetrator decides to take and beat a person or something there, it's not the victim's fault. It's that perpetrator. He takes an action and he gets what comes from it, or she.
Peggy, you were telling me earlier, and you were somewhat sarcastic when you said it, and I want to bring this out. The system, and I'll just call it that, the system, I guess, makes it so that these guys, and this fella in particular who was married to Hope, they don't spend much time in jail, and it sounds like orders of protection are worthless. How frustrating is that when a victim puts out an order of protection and all the whatever paperwork that's necessary to keep them away from them and the children? How frustrating is that? And especially when women will tend to go back to these abusers, that there's really not much punishment unless you darn near kill somebody.
Well, the frustration comes in when the alleged victim is willing to prosecute. That's where the frustration comes in. And if the case is nullied or dismissed and nothing's done, that's where the frustration comes in, because that person is trusting in the system and then they're not getting any result. So a lot of them go away believing, well, what's the point of calling 911? Look what's happened. They kind of get re-victimized by the justice system. Unfortunately, the justice system is overwhelmed. Law enforcement's overwhelmed. The court system is overwhelmed. There's thousands of cases going through that court system per year. There's only so many people and so much stuff that can be handled in a day. That's the sad part of it. The majority of people, you might have one incident, and that's the only incident that they'll ever have is the one incident. Then you've got what we call frequent flyers, and the people, it's a revolving door. They're in jail numerous times, repeatedly times for domestic assaults, and then reconcile with their alleged victim. As far as orders of protection being worthless, they're not really worthless documents, but they're court orders. They're backed up by the law of the state of Tennessee, and as law enforcement officers, that's what we do, is enforce the law if the person reports it. And we try, I call it making a believer out of somebody. If a person asks for an order of protection, and we serve either Ray Davis and Detective Howard serving on the respondent, they're told it's a no-contact order. If they violate that, and the person that asks for protection reports it, then they go to jail. The law requires that they be arrested. I call that making a believer out of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to make a believer out of somebody 3 or 4 times, but that really, they're not going to get it. If they have to go to jail 3 or 4 times, they just have no regard for court order or the law.
Detective Davis, let me ask you, we talked about this particularly high-profile case of Chris Brown and Rihanna. Our listeners, are of the demographic where we probably are not buying a whole lot of Chris Brown CDs and Rihanna CDs. We may have sort of a fringe knowledge of who they are. But because of domestic violence and because of this whooping that this guy put on her, we now know who they are. We now know that it was a brutal beating. But the frustration is what I want to ask you about. it appears today that Rihanna is not cooperating with this investigation. She is apparently not going to press charges and so forth and so on. How frustrating is that to you as investigators and advocates and folks who are involved in all this, that you work a case, you try to get a victim some relief, and yet when it's time to make a believer out of them, as Peggy said a minute ago, they just won't step up and do anything?
Well, basically, the way the laws are now, they've taken that option away because the victim can no longer decline prosecution. If the victim was deceased or something like that, then we wouldn't have that victim, but we would still prosecute the case. And now that they've taken that away from them, they can no longer, the state picks up the case after it's, when it comes out. And so we can use excited utterance or whatever. And normally when we talk to the victim at the first, when it first happens, they're going to tell you exactly what happened at that point. So we have that knowledge, and they're going to write a statement to that. And so we'll use that to prosecute, even if the victim decides that they want to decline the prosecution. And then it's just up to the judge whether they're going to do something to that person or not. But as far as the victim not wanting to prosecute, that's a thing of the past.
It
pretty
is.
much. Yes.
All right, let's spend the last couple of minutes here and discuss solutions. Let's talk about how do we, as a society, how does anyone listening, who is dealing with this, or let's just say that there are people out there who have hit their wife, and it could parlay into a more serious situation. Where do they turn for help? Who do they talk to? Obviously, it's the church or a counselor or maybe a good friend or something. But how do we get rid of this problem? Now, you mentioned earlier, Ray, drugs and alcohol obviously play a big part. Peggy, you were telling me earlier that you had in your lifetime a personal reference of sorts where you've seen it and been around it and so forth. So I don't know that it's just drugs and alcohol, but some people grow up seeing their daddy beat on mama. And if it was my generation, then my parents of their generation, we didn't talk about it. It never came out. So what do we do? What do you recommend that we would do as a society, as a community, to help solve this problem and get this off the radar screen?
Part of my solution would be for people to stop looking the other way. It's been my experience. A lot of people, they're so busy, they don't want to get involved, or they're afraid of retaliation to get involved. I'm going to make reference quickly to a trip to Walmart my son and I had made, and it was a domestic ongoing right there in Walmart. Day after Thanksgiving, one of your biggest shopping days, nobody's paying attention. Everybody's looking the other way. Obviously, I walked up and got involved, but, it wasn't an assault, but he was really reaming her out and everything, and she was crying. She was trying to get away from him, and he kept, getting in front of her where she couldn't get away from him. And I got involved. Of course, my son was standing there, and he took off running. Once I identified myself as a deputy sheriff, he took off running. But I started, asking a lot of people, if you saw this happen, what would you do? And they're like, I wouldn't get involved.
Yeah, why won't we get involved, Ray? Why won't people get involved anymore?
They fear retaliation against themselves, things of that sort. But the main thing now is, even if somebody was to get involved and report a domestic situation, our hands are kind of tied unless the victim takes that first step and makes that report themselves and helps us to prosecute them. And so, therefore, that would be my, going to get the order of protection. Even though the order of protection may not result in jail time, it puts that person, the offender, on notice that I'm not going to take this anymore, and somebody else knows that this is going on inside this household.
Yeah, I think it's sad or it's disappointing that... and I'm the same way. I don't know that if I witnessed something like that I wouldn't see it through. I've never had that experience, but I know that we are too busy. We ain't got time to go to court. We ain't got time to be a witness. In fact, I've been in accident. I've seen accident scenes where, and I've been a witness and I've given my account, where others who witnessed the wreck will not give an account or will not give a name and number and this and we just don't want to get caught up in all that. I understand that, and more and more people are that way. If you do nothing other than call 911 and say, hey, this guy's whipping up on this gal out here at Walmart, see you, bye, and get somebody to the scene. But, all right, where folks get help, I mentioned the number, Safe House. It's 552-6900. There's an 800 number, which is 1-866-592-6902. Where else would you folks recommend that folks reach out to report domestic violence? Can they do it anonymously? You know, we have a tips line, Ray, where you can call in anonymous tips on crime. So, can people call in domestic abuse situations anonymously? Does that do any good?
People can call me at the sheriff's office at 648-0611, extension 5210. And obviously, if it's a criminal act, they're going to report. I'll transfer them to the 911 dispatch. If it's something not criminal, but they still want assistance, I can refer them to other agencies. Or they can call the Clarksville Police Department domestic violence detectives at 645-1126, and that would be Detective Howard, Detective Davis.
What about you, Detective Davis? Any final thoughts from both of you on anyone listening who may be a victim, anyone listening who may be the aggressor, or any child or anyone who knows anything about a domestic violence issue, where to get help, what to do?
As far as for the aggressor, if you are the aggressor, you just have to realize that when it comes to light that that's what's going on, you're going to pay a price. Whether it may not be a long term, but you're going to pay a price. When you're convicted of domestic violence, you can never carry a weapon again, things of that sort. People, when you go for jobs, they frown on that. They might not hire you just because of that. And I've heard people who have actually been charged with domestic violence who come back and tell me that they're having problems finding jobs and things of that sort. And you're going to go to jail. It's just that simple. You're going to go to jail, and you're going to sit in jail. They have the mandatory cool-off period. You're going to sit down there for 12 hours, and then you're going to get what's called a conditional release, and that conditional release is going to keep you away from your home, and it's just going to cost a bunch of money and things of that sort. As far as the victim, take the first step. Go get an order of protection. If you need to talk to somebody, you're afraid or what have you, there's always a chance. You can always get in touch with myself or Detective Howard. Just call the police department and tell them that you need to speak to us, and we'll come out whenever we need to. As far as the orders of protection, myself and Detective Howard, there's no time on what time of night or day you may see us out there, because we're going to serve that order. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, we're going to catch you wherever you're at.
And let me just point out that you don't want these two fellas showing up at your house at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm just going to say that not only are they law enforcement officers, but they're big fellas. I'm just saying. Peggy, thanks for coming in. And I'll bet you could whip somebody's butt, too, if you got a little...
I've been known to have a scrap or two.
Well, you're married to Ray Micais.
Yes.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Two of you are both in law.
That's why we're still married, Hank.
Exactly. Well, you both carry guns.
Yes.
Who's the better shot? That's what I think
house.
keeps this marriage exciting, is that,
right.
you go to the range and you're training and whatever, but we appreciate you. We appreciate all law enforcement officers, obviously, no matter what you do. And everyone I talked to this week trying to organize this program, very, very committed, very, very passionate about what you do. You have to be. And as I asked you earlier, how do you keep your emotions in check? And we're so thankful that you all do. And Detective Howard, what have you observed? Anything good this morning? Are you learning?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Everything's good? Good.
I think he wants to pat you down, Hank.
He ain't touching me. But if he wants to pat me down, I'm not saying no. I have all the respect. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, righto. Well, we appreciate you, and I know victims appreciate you, and all the whole system of trying to get them free, get them loose, get their life back on track. And again, I want to give these numbers. Safe House is 552-6900. If you're the victim of any abuse, 911. I believe both of you made that clear, that, look, just call 911 and help is on the way. So good luck. Thanks so much, Peggy, for coming in. You were very helpful in putting this all together. All right, good luck to you. Thank you very much, Detective Davis. Thank you, and let us know if there's anything that we can do as a radio station and websites and all, that we can get more information out there for anyone who needs it.